Boy asks his mother for a used coat. The owner laughs. But a rich man was listening hidden. Brandon Johnson tried to hold back tears while holding his grandmother Dorothy's hand tightly. At 12 years old, he carried a responsibility no child should have, but need doesn't choose an age. The winter rain in Chicago was getting heavier, and Dorothy wouldn't stop coughing. The thin coat she had worn for over 10 years barely protected her from the icy wind cutting through the city. That's when Brandon saw that elegant store on Michigan Avenue and made a decision that would change their lives forever. "Grandma, wait here just a minute," he said, pointing to the awning of a nearby bakery. "No, my boy, let's go home," Dorothy whispered between coughing fits. "I'm just going to ask one thing. I promise it'll be quick." Brandon pushed the glass door of the boutique and immediately felt all eyes turn to him. His wet, patched clothes contrasted brutally with the store's sophisticated environment. The mannequins displayed coats that cost more than he could save in years. Behind the counter, Richard Thompson watched the boy with a poorly disguised expression of disgust. Having owned the store for 15 years, he prided himself on serving only the most refined clientele in the neighborhood. "Hi, mister." Brandon timidly approached the counter. "You wouldn't happen to have any used coats that don't fit anymore? It's for my grandma. She's very sick." Richard's laugh echoed through the entire store, making the two customers looking at dresses turn to see what was happening. "Used coat?" he guffawed louder. "Kid, you're in the wrong place. Here we only sell new and expensive items. Very expensive." "I know, sir. But I thought maybe you might have something old that doesn't work anymore," Brandon insisted, pulling some coins from his pocket. "I have this. I saved it up selling candy at the stoplight." Outside, watching through the window, William Roberts stopped walking. The 52-year-old businessman had just left an important meeting and was walking to his car when the scene in the store caught his attention. Something about that situation made him stay there, protected from the rain under the awning of the building next door. "Selling candy at the stoplight?" Richard mocked. "And you think with that change you're going to buy something here? Kid, you can't even pay for the hanger with that." The customers chuckled softly, whispering among themselves about the child's audacity. Brandon felt his face burn with shame, but he thought of Dorothy coughing outside and didn't give up. "Please, sir, my grandma is very sick. The doctor at the clinic said she needs protection from the cold. Anything will do." "Anything?" Richard leaned over the counter. "Then go to the Chinese store there on the corner. They have cheap clothes for people like you. I already went there. They said they only sell wholesale." Brandon lowered his head. "Please, sir. She raised me alone. It's just her and me in the world. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." William watched every word, every gesture of contempt from Richard. His hands clenched into fists inside the pockets of the Italian coat he wore. That scene transported him back in time to a cold afternoon 30 years ago, when he was just an orphan boy begging for help. "Listen here, punk." Richard came out from behind the counter and approached Brandon. "You're bothering my customers. Take your little coins and get out of here before I call security." "But sir—" "Get out!" he shouted, making Brandon step back. Outside, Dorothy saw her grandson being humiliated through the glass. Her trembling legs could barely keep her standing, but she headed for the store door. As she pushed it open, a new coughing fit overwhelmed her. "Brandon, son, let's go," she said with a hoarse voice. "Grandma, I couldn't—" The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, so this is your grandmother?" Richard looked at Dorothy with disdain. "Ma'am, next time teach your grandson not to bother serious establishments. You two can't even afford a pair of socks here." Dorothy lowered her head, feeling the weight of humiliation. At 68 years old, she had already been through many hardships, but being treated like a beggar in front of her grandson broke her inside. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. "It won't happen again." "I hope not." Richard crossed his arms. "Now leave before I call the police for disturbing the peace." William could no longer stand still. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and pushed the door of the store open. The bell at the entrance chimed delicately, announcing the arrival of someone who clearly belonged in that environment. "Good afternoon." William greeted with the firm and authoritative voice of someone accustomed to being heard. Richard immediately changed his posture. His eyes lit up at the sight of the expensive suit, the Swiss watch, and the Italian leather shoes. This was exactly the type of customer he dreamed of serving. "Good afternoon, sir." He practically bowed. "How can I help you today? We have exclusive pieces just arrived from Europe." "I'm looking for gifts for my family," William said calmly, observing Dorothy and Brandon still standing near the door. "But first, I'd like to better understand how you treat all your customers." "What do you mean, sir?" Richard seemed confused. "I was outside and saw how you attended to this lady and her grandson." William discreetly pointed to Dorothy. "It made me curious about the store's customer service policy." Richard's face lost all color. He glanced quickly at Dorothy and Brandon, then turned his eyes back to William, stammering, "Sir, you don't understand. They aren't real customers. They came here begging, bothering decent people." "Begging?" William raised an eyebrow. "I heard the boy offering money for a coat. How is that begging?" "Well, it's just that—" Richard swallowed hard. "Their money isn't even enough for a button on our pieces." William walked slowly to where Dorothy and Brandon were. The elderly woman tried to pull her grandson to leave, but William made a gentle gesture for them to stay. "Excuse me, ma'am. May I know your name?" "Dorothy, sir," she replied softly, without raising her eyes. "And you, young man?" "Brandon," the boy answered, still with tears in his eyes. "Brandon, can you tell me exactly what you asked the store owner?" The boy looked at his grandmother, who nodded, encouraging him to speak. "I just asked if he had any used coat that didn't fit anymore. For my grandma. She's sick, and the doctor said she needs to protect herself from the cold." "And you offered money for it?" "Yes, sir. I have $12.30. Brandon showed the coins in his palm. "I saved up selling candy at the Fifth Avenue intersection." William felt something break inside his chest. He remembered perfectly being in the same situation decades ago, holding dirty coins in the hope of getting something that would protect him from the cold. "Richard," he turned to the store owner, "did you refuse to sell anything to them?" "Sir, you need to understand," Richard tried to justify himself, "that kind of people, they lower the store's standards. My important customers don't like to see." "What kind of people?" William's voice became dangerously low. "Well, simple people, poor, you know how it is." William walked slowly to the counter, his steps echoing in the tense silence of the store. The two customers who were looking at dresses completely stopped what they were doing to follow the conversation. "Richard, do you have any documents proving that this store makes donations to needy families?" "Donations?" Richard seemed surprised. "Well, not exactly documents, but—" "Yes or no?" "No, sir." "Interesting, because according to the City Hall records, this store declares itself as a participant in social programs to get tax reductions." Richard's blood ran cold. He had no idea someone could check this information so easily. "Sir, there must be some mistake." "The mistake," William interrupted, "was me believing this store deserved the permit it has to operate on this street." "Permit," Richard stammered. "Are you from City Hall?" "No, I'm William Roberts, the owner of the building where this store operates." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard felt his legs go weak and had to lean on the counter. The customers exchanged shocked looks. Dorothy looked up for the first time, surprised. "Mr. Roberts, I didn't know—" Richard began to tremble. "It was a misunderstanding." "I can explain that—" "Explain what?" William crossed his arms. "How you humiliated an elderly lady and her grandson. How you called them beggars. How you yelled at a child who just wanted to protect his sick grandmother. Sir, please." Richard approached with his hands outstretched. "I was having a bad day. It wasn't my intention." "Your intention," William cut him off, "was very clear. You only respect those who have money to show off." Brandon watched everything without fully understanding what was happening, but realizing that this elegant man was defending him and his grandmother. "Brandon," William turned to the boy, "you said you saved this money by selling candy?" "Yes, sir. Every day after school I go to the intersection. I take the candies Grandma makes at home." "Your grandmother makes the candies?" "Yes, she does," Dorothy answered timidly. It's our only income. Brandon helps me by selling them so we can pay the rent. William felt a lump in his throat. The strength of that family, the dignity with which they faced poverty, the way they took care of each other, all of it touched him deeply. Richard, he turned back to the store owner, how much does the cheapest coat you have here cost? Sir, the cheapest would be about $400. And the most expensive? $2,500, sir. Show me both. Richard rushed to get the items, hoping this might help his situation. He brought a simple wool coat and an imported brand-name one, placing them on the counter. Now, William said calmly, I want you to explain to Mrs. Dorothy and Brandon why their money isn't good enough for this store. Sir, Richard looked at Dorothy, who kept her eyes down. I was wrong, I apologize. Apologize? William raised his voice. Do you think that fixes the humiliation you caused? Dorothy, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Mr. Roberts, you don't need to trouble yourself with us. We know our place. Your place? William turned to her. Mrs. Dorothy, what is your place? We're simple people, sir. We don't have the education to frequent places like this. Education? William felt his anger grow. You raised this boy by yourself, taught him to work honestly, to have dignity. What education is more important than that? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Brandon looked at his grandfather with admiration. No one had ever spoken about them like that, with so much respect and affection. Richard, William continued, you're going to learn a lesson today that you should have learned a long time ago. Yes, sir. Anything. You're going to sell the most expensive coat in the store to Mrs. Dorothy for the price she can pay. What do you mean, sir? Brandon offered $12.30. That will be the price of the $2,500 coat. Brandon's eyes widened as he mentally calculated the enormous loss. Sir, that would be a huge loss. A loss? William smiled coldly. Do you think your loss is greater than the dignity you tried to take from this family? No, sir, but... There is no but. Either you accept this condition, or this store closes today. Dorothy tried to intervene. Mr. Roberts, this isn't fair. We don't want to harm anyone. Mrs. Williams, William turned to her kindly, this isn't about harming. It's about justice. This man judged you by your appearance, humiliated you publicly. Now he's going to learn that a person's worth isn't measured by the money they have. Brandon realized he had no choice. Losing $2,400 was bad, but losing the store would be much worse. All right, sir, I accept the conditions. Great, William smiled. But there's one more thing. What, sir? You will offer a sincere apology to Mrs. Williams and Brandon, and I want it to be from the heart, not just because I'm forcing you. Brandon took a deep breath and approached Dorothy and Brandon. For the first time, he truly looked into their eyes. Mrs. Williams. Brandon, he began, his voice choked. I apologize from the bottom of my heart. I was cruel, prejudiced, and unfair to you. There is no excuse for what I did. Dorothy saw the sincerity in the man's eyes and nodded. I accept your apology, sir. Thank you. Brandon turned to the boy. And you, son, do you forgive me too? Brandon looked at his grandmother, who gave an encouraging gesture. I forgive you, yes, sir. William watched the scene with satisfaction. There was something powerful in forgiveness, something that transformed not only the receiver, but also the giver. Now, he said, let's take care of this coat. Brandon took the most expensive coat and offered it to Dorothy. Please, ma'am, try it on. Dorothy hesitated, but William encouraged her. Go ahead, Mrs. Williams, it's yours. When she put on the coat, the transformation was stunning, not just because the piece was beautiful and high quality, but because for the first time in a long time, Dorothy felt valued. It looks perfect on you, Brandon said, and this time his admiration was genuine. Brandon smiled, seeing his grandmother so elegant. He took the coins from his pocket and placed them on the counter. Here is the money, sir. Brandon looked at the coins for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he pushed the money back to the boy. Keep that, son. Use it to buy supplies for the candies your grandmother makes. But you said that. I said a lot of foolish things today, Brandon interrupted. This coat is a gift, a way to truly apologize. William smiled, approving the gesture. There was hope for that man after all. Mrs. Williams, he addressed the elderly woman, would you and Brandon like to have coffee with me? I know a place nearby that makes the best hot chocolate in the city. Sir, we don't want to be a bother. It's no bother. It's a pleasure. As they prepared to leave, William turned one last time to Brandon. One last thing. I want you to think about what happened here today. Every day people come into your store, some rich, some poor, but they are all people with dreams, fears, and needs. Remember that. I will remember, sir, and thank you for teaching me that lesson. Don't thank me. Thank them, William pointed to Dorothy and Brandon, for having the kindness to forgive your mistakes. At the cafe, while Brandon savored the hot chocolate and Dorothy finally stopped coughing thanks to the coat that warmed her, William began asking questions about their lives. How long have the two of you been on your own? Since Brandon was 4 years old, Dorothy replied. My daughter had complications during the birth of her second child. We lost her and the baby on the same day. William felt a tightness in his chest. The story of that family was even more touching than I had imagined. And Brandon's father? He never showed up, Dorothy said simply. When he found out my daughter was pregnant, he disappeared. Brandon, who'd been quiet until then, spoke up. But I have the best grandma in the world. She taught me everything I know. How do you support yourselves besides the candies? I used to sew for others, Dorothy explained. But with age, my eyesight isn't good anymore. Now I can only make the candies and Brandon helps me by selling them. And where do you live? In a studio apartment in the South Side. It's small, but it's our home. William asked a few more questions, getting to know the story of that family better. Every detail he heard impressed him more. Dorothy's strength, Brandon's early maturity, the unconditional love they had for each other. Mrs. Williams, he finally said, I have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal, sir? I own several businesses. One of them is an artisanal confectionery. We're always looking for authentic homemade recipes. Dorothy seemed interested. You mean... I would like to try your candies. If they're as good as I imagine, perhaps we can form a partnership. A partnership? Brandon perked up. Yes. You would supply the candies for my confectionery. It would be dignified work, with a fixed salary and all the benefits. Dorothy felt her eyes fill with tears. Mr. Roberts, that would be a dream. Then let's make that dream come true. How about if tomorrow you bring me some samples? Of course, Dorothy smiled. I'll make the best candies of my life. I'm sure you will, William smiled back. When they said goodbye, William insisted on paying for a taxi for Dorothy and Brandon to return home. He handed his business card to Dorothy. If you need anything, call me, and tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon I'll expect you at the confectionery. That night, Dorothy worked late preparing the best candies she could make. Brandon helped, organizing the ingredients and wrapping the candies with the care his grandmother had taught him. Grandma, he said as they worked, do you think our life will really change? I don't know, my boy. But one thing I do know, today we learned that there are still good people in the world. Like you always taught me I should be. Like I always taught you, Dorothy smiled. And you see, the good we do always comes back to us in some way. The next day, William waited for them at the confectionery with anticipation. When he tasted Dorothy's candies, his eyes lit up. Mrs. Williams, these are the most delicious candies I've ever tasted in my life. Really, sir? Absolutely. I want to order 500 units per week to start. Dorothy almost fainted from emotion. 500 candies per week would mean a stable, dignified income that would allow her and Brandon to live with dignity. And there's more, William continued. I want both of you to come work here at the confectionery. Dorothy as artisanal candy chef, and Brandon as an apprentice on weekends and holidays. Chef? Dorothy couldn't believe it. Sir, I've never been a chef of anything. Being a chef isn't about a diploma, William smiled. It's about talent, passion, and love for what you do. And you have that in abundance. 3 months later, Dorothy and Brandon's life had completely transformed. They moved to a comfortable apartment near the confectionery. Dorothy not only worked as a chef, but had become one of the employees most beloved by customers. Brandon continued studying, but now at a private school that William insisted on paying for. On weekends, he helped at the confectionery and was learning not just about candies, but about business management. One day, William called Dorothy into his office. "Mrs. Williams, I want to make a proposal." "What would that be, Mr. William?" "I want you to become my partner in the confectionery." Dorothy nearly fell off her chair. "Partner? Sir, I don't understand anything about business. But you understand sweets, quality, and treating people well. That's more important than any technical knowledge." "Mr. William, why are you doing all this for us?" William stayed silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Mrs. Dorothy, when I was Brandon's age, I was also an orphan. I lived on the streets, endured cold and humiliation. One day a lady like yourself gave me an opportunity. She taught me how to work, gave me dignity, showed me I had worth. And what happened to her? When I finally had the means to repay everything she did for me, it was too late. She had passed away." William wiped away a tear. "I never got to thank her, but I can honor her memory by helping other people like you." Dorothy understood perfectly. She stood up and hugged William. "She would be proud of the man you've become." "I hope so." William returned the hug. "And I hope that one day when Brandon grows up, he'll do the same for others." "I'm sure he will. Helping others is in his blood." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 6 months after the partnership, the sweet shop had become one of the most sought after in Chicago. Dorothy's recipes had become famous, and people came from far away to taste her sweets. But what made William most proud was seeing how Dorothy and Brandon had kept their essence. Despite the financial success, they remained humble, generous, and always willing to help those in need. Brandon, now 13, had created a project at school to collect clothes and food for needy families. Dorothy, in turn, always left some free sweets for children who passed by the shop. One day, an unexpected situation tested all the values they had built together. Richard, the boutique owner, appeared at the sweet shop. He looked visibly downcast, with wrinkled clothes and an expression of despair. "Mr. William," he approached hesitantly, "may I speak with you?" William was surprised but received him politely. "Of course, Richard, have a seat." I came to ask for help," Richard said with difficulty. "My store is going bankrupt." "How so?" "After that day, after what happened with Mrs. Dorothy and Brandon, I thought a lot. I started treating all customers with respect, regardless of how they were dressed." "And that hurt your business?" "No, sir. Actually, it improved. Many people started coming to the store, but then the crisis hit. Suppliers raised prices, and I didn't know how to adapt." William listened carefully as Richard explained his situation. The man had genuinely changed, but lacked the management knowledge to face the economic difficulties. "And why did you come to me?" "Because you taught me that asking for help isn't shameful when done with humility." Richard lowered his head. "And because I have no one else." At that moment, Dorothy appeared with a tray of coffee and cookies. Seeing Richard, she seemed surprised, but greeted him courteously. "Good afternoon, Mr. Richard." "Mrs. Dorothy," he stood up quickly. "Do you remember me?" "Of course I do. I wanted to apologize once again, and to thank you." "Thank me?" "For forgiving me that day. It made me rethink my whole life. I changed, became a better person. I couldn't save my business, but at least I saved my soul." Dorothy was moved by Richard's sincere words. "I'm happy to hear that, sir." "Mrs. Dorothy," William intervened, "Richard is going through difficulties and came to ask for help. What do you think?" Dorothy thought for a moment. "Mr. William, if he really changed, I think he deserves a second chance. Everyone does." "Even after how he treated you?" "Especially because of that." Dorothy smiled. "It's easy to help those who've always been good to us. The hard part is helping those who've wronged us. But that's what makes us better people." William smiled, admiring Dorothy's wisdom. He turned to Richard. "What kind of help do you need?" "I don't know," Richard confessed. "I don't understand management, marketing, anything. I only know how to sell clothes. What if I offered you a job?" "A job? Here at the sweet shop, as a salesperson. You have customer service experience, and now you've learned to treat everyone with respect." Richard couldn't hold back his tears. "Mr. William, that would be more than I deserve." "No," Dorothy intervened. "It's exactly what you deserve. A chance to start over." "But I'll need to learn everything about sweets." "I'll teach you," Dorothy offered, "just like Mr. William taught me about business." And that's how Richard joined the sweet shop team. In the beginning, he made some mistakes, but his dedication to change was evident. He treated every customer like they were the most important person in the world, especially those who looked more modest. Brandon, who was now 14, also helped Richard adjust. The boy, with the maturity life had given him early on, taught the former boutique owner some valuable lessons about humility and empathy. "Mr. Richard," he said one day, "do you know what the best gift you ever gave me was that day in the store?" "I didn't give you any gift, Brandon. I was cruel to you." "Yes, you did. You showed me exactly the kind of person I never want to be in life." Richard fell silent, absorbing the boy's words. "And now," Brandon continued, "you're showing me that people can truly change. That's an even greater gift." 2 years passed, and the sweet shop had become a true center for social transformation. William, Dorothy, Brandon, and Richard worked together not just on the business, but on various social projects. They created a professional training program for underprivileged youth, teaching them how to make sweets and work in the food industry. Dorothy was the head teacher, passing on not just techniques, but life values. Brandon, now 16, had become an exemplary young man. Studious, hard-working, and extremely generous, he coordinated a project to collect winter clothes for the homeless, inspired by the experience he had with his grandmother. One day, William gathered everyone for an important talk. "Folks, I want to share some news with you." "What news, Mr. William?" Dorothy asked. "I received a proposal to open a second sweet shop in the city center." "That's wonderful," Richard said excitedly. "Yes, but I want you all to run it," William smiled. "Dorothy as the majority partner, Brandon as assistant manager when he turns 18, and Richard as customer service supervisor." Dorothy nearly fainted. "Mr. William, that's too much responsibility for us." "Mrs. Dorothy, you've already proven you're capable, and more importantly, you've proven your hearts are in the right place. But what about you? I'll keep supporting you, of course, but I want you to be the main characters. You deserve it." Brandon, always practical, asked the question everyone was thinking. "What if it doesn't work out?" "It will work out," William said with conviction, "because you have something money can't buy. Love for what you do and respect for people." The second sweet shop opened 6 months later in an emotional ceremony. The first customer was an elderly lady who arrived in simple clothes with a few cents in her hand, wanting to buy a sweet for her grandson. Dorothy personally attended to her with the kindness and respect that had always characterized her work. Brandon wrapped the candy with special care. Richard offered a free hot tea to warm the lady from the cold. William watched everything from afar, his heart full of pride and gratitude. That scene perfectly summarized everything they had built together, a prosperous business based on human dignity. At the end of the day, when they closed the shop, Dorothy approached William. "Mr. William, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course, Mrs. Dorothy. Why did you never start a family? You never married?" William smiled with melancholy. "I was always so focused on business, so determined to succeed in life, that I forgot to live. When I realized it, I was already too old to start." "Old?" Dorothy laughed. "You're 55 years old. That's not old. To start a family, it is." "Mr. William," Dorothy took his hand, "you already have a family. We are your family." William felt his eyes fill with tears. It was true. Dorothy was like a mother to him, Brandon like the son he never had, and Richard like a brother he had found along the way. "You're right," he said emotionally. "You are my family, the best family I could have. At that moment, Brandon approached. "Can I join this family hug?" They hugged right there, in the middle of the sweet shop, surrounded by the sweet aroma of cakes and the human warmth they had built together. Richard, who was watching the scene, approached hesitantly. "Do you think that I can also be part of this family?" "Of course," Dorothy pulled him into the hug. "Family isn't just blood. It's love, care, forgiveness, and second chances." 5 years later, the Dorothy's Sweet Shop chain had expanded to 5 stores in Chicago. All followed the same principles: quality products, respect for customers, and social responsibility. Brandon, now 21 years old, had graduated in business administration and become a respected entrepreneur. But he never forgot his origins. He maintained a social project that offered scholarships to underprivileged youth, in addition to teaching entrepreneurship to low-income families. Dorothy, at 75 years old, remained active and full of energy. She had become a reference in the handmade sweets industry, gave lectures on women's entrepreneurship, and was respected by business people across the country. Richard had found his true calling in customer service. He created a special training program for store employees, teaching them to treat all customers with equality and respect. His story of personal transformation inspired many people. William, at 60 years old, had retired from business but remained involved in the social projects. He was writing a book about his experience, telling how the encounter with Dorothy and Brandon had changed his perspective on success and happiness. One day, while walking down Michigan Avenue, William passed by the location of Richard's old boutique. The space now housed a community library, maintained by the foundation they had created. A sign at the entrance caught his attention. "Dorothy Williams Library, where all knowledge is welcome regardless of who seeks it." He smiled, remembering that rainy winter day when it all began. A child asking for a used coat for his grandmother, a man laughing at the situation, and an observer who decided to act. Sometimes, William thought, the biggest transformations start with the smallest gestures. An act of kindness can change a life. A moment of courage can transform a family. And a decision to help can create a legacy that lasts for generations. That evening, as they did every week, they gathered for dinner at Dorothy's house. It was a tradition that began when she and Brandon moved into the new apartment, and that continued even after everyone prospered. "Grandma," Brandon said during dessert, "I was thinking about something." "About what, my boy?" "Do you remember that day at the store when I asked for the used coat?" "How could I forget? If the store owner had sold me any old coat for $12, our lives would have been completely different." Dorothy thought for a moment. "That's true. But you know what I think?" "What?" "I think things happen the way they're meant to happen. Maybe we needed to go through that humiliation to appreciate everything that came after. Do you think it was fate?" "I don't know if it was fate," Dorothy smiled, "but I know it was a lesson. We learned that it doesn't matter how people treat us. What matters is how we treat people." William, who was listening to the conversation, was moved. "Mrs. Dorothy, you are the wisest person I know." "I'm not wise, Mr. William. I'm just old," she laughed. "And life teaches a lot to those who live a long time." "What does it teach, for example?" "It teaches that money solves many problems, but it doesn't solve the problems of the heart. It teaches that being respected is more important than being feared. And it teaches that the greatest wealth anyone can have is the love of family." Richard, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "Mrs. Dorothy, can I make a confession?" "Of course, my boy. I spent my whole life thinking that success was having wealthy clients, selling expensive products, being recognized by the elite. Today I know I was completely wrong." "And what is success to you now?" "Success is looking in the mirror every morning and liking the person I see. It's knowing that I'm being useful to the world. It's having a clear conscience when I go to sleep." Brandon nodded. "That's true. I always wanted to be rich to give Grandma a better life. Today I know that a better life isn't just about having money. It's about having peace, having purpose, having people who care about you." William raised his glass of juice. "Then let's toast to that, to the better life we built together." "Cheers," everyone said in unison. After dinner, while Dorothy and Richard washed the dishes and talked about new recipes, William and Brandon went out to the balcony. "Brandon," William said, "can I give you some advice?" "Of course, Mr. William." "Never forget where you came from. Not the poverty, but the values your grandmother taught you. Generosity, humility, perseverance. I will never forget. But can I ask you a question?" "Go ahead." "Why did you never want us to call you father or grandfather? We are a real family." William was moved by the question. "Because I have great respect for the memory of your parents and your grandfather. I don't want to take their place in your heart." "Mr. William," Brandon put his hand on the older man's shoulder, "the heart doesn't have limited space. It grows to fit everyone we love." At that moment, William understood that he had truly found his family. It wasn't the family he had planned to have, but it was the family that fate had given him, and it was perfect. 2 years later, their story made the newspapers when Brandon was chosen as the Young Entrepreneur of the Year. At the award ceremony, he gave a speech that moved the entire audience. "This award isn't mine. It's my grandmother's, who taught me that honest work is worth more than any fortune. It's Mr. Williams who showed me that generosity is the mark of a true leader. And it's Mr. Richards who proved to me that it's never too late to change and be a better person. But most importantly," Brandon continued with a choked voice, "this award is for all those who were once humiliated, scorned, or considered inferior for being poor. You are not inferior. You are worthy of respect, opportunities, and love." The audience rose in an emotional standing ovation. Dorothy, who was in the front row, cried tears of pride. William and Richard were with her, equally moved. That day they understood that the seed planted on that rainy afternoon had grown into a mighty tree, bearing fruit not just for them, but for the entire community around them. The Dorothy's Sweet Shop Foundation had helped over 1,000 families escape poverty through job training and microloans. The bakeries employed more than 200 people, always prioritizing young people from underprivileged communities. But for them, the greatest success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the letters they received from people thanking them for the opportunity. It was in the smiles of the employees who had found dignity in their work. It was in the certainty that they were making a difference in the world. One of those letters especially touched Dorothy. It was from a 12-year-old girl, the same age Brandon was when it all began. "Mrs. Dorothy, my mother works at the downtown bakery. Before she cried every day because she couldn't find a job. People said she was good for nothing because she only studied up to the 5th grade. Today she is a supervisor and is going to college at night. She always says that you saved our family. I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help people too. Thank you for existing. Sincerely, Maria." Dorothy kept that letter along with other special ones in a box she kept by her bedside. Whenever she felt tired or discouraged, she would read a few of them and regain her energy. Brandon, who was now engaged to a teacher he met in one of the social projects, still lived with his grandmother. He said he would only move out when she no longer needed him, but Dorothy knew it was the opposite. She was the one who couldn't imagine life without her grandson. "Grandma," he said one night, "Emily wants you to be the matron of honor at our wedding." "Matron of honor?" Dorothy was moved. "But I'm not part of her family." "You're going to be my mother-in-law. Doesn't that make you family?" Dorothy laughed through her tears. "You silly boy, of course I'll be the matron of honor." The wedding was scheduled for the end of the year, and it would be a simple celebration, but full of love. William would play the role of Brandon's father, walking him down the aisle. Richard would be the best man, and the entire bakery family would be there. But before the wedding, a surprise changed everyone's plans. Dorothy received an unexpected call. "Hello, is this Mrs. Dorothy Williams?" "Yes, speaking." "My name is Dr. Wilson, from Memorial Hospital. Do you know a man named Robert Williams?" Dorothy felt her heart race. Robert Williams was her younger brother, who had disappeared over 20 years ago after getting involved with the wrong crowd. "Yes, I do. He's my brother." "Has something happened?" "He is a patient here. He had a heart attack. He's asking to speak with you." Dorothy was in shock. After 2 decades with no news, Robert had appeared just now, when she had finally found peace and stability. How is he, doctor? Stable, but in delicate condition. He said he has no one else in the world but you. Dorothy hung up the phone with trembling hands. Brandon, who had overheard the conversation, came closer. Grandma, who is Robert Williams? He's my younger brother. I never talked about him because it was too painful. What happened? Dorothy took a deep breath. When you were little, Robert lived with us. He helped take care of you. He was a loving uncle. But he got involved with the wrong people. He started drinking, using drugs. And then? One day he took some things from the house to sell. They weren't valuable things, but they were all we had. I told him I couldn't help him anymore if he continued like that. And he left? He was furious, said I was choosing you over him, that I was no longer his sister, and he disappeared. Brandon hugged his grandmother. Grandma, do you want to go see him? I don't know, my boy. I'm afraid of what I'll find. You always taught me that family is family, no matter what happens. I know, but, Grandma, if I were sick in a hospital, with no one in the world, wouldn't you come see me? Dorothy looked at her grandson and knew he was right. Regardless of what Robert had done, he was her brother and needed her. You're right. Let's go see him. William and Richard insisted on accompanying them to the hospital. When they entered the room, Dorothy barely recognized the man in the bed. Robert was thin, aged, with the appearance of someone who had lived a very difficult life. Dorothy? He whispered when he saw her. Hi, Robert. She approached the bed. How are you? Bad. He tried to smile. But better now that you're here. Robert, this is my grandson Brandon. Do you remember him? Robert looked at Brandon, and his eyes filled with tears. The little boy, he whispered. How you've grown, son. Hi, Uncle Robert, Brandon said gently. Grandma always talked about you. Good things or bad things? Robert tried to joke, but the pain was evident in his voice. She talked with longing, Brandon replied. She always said you were a good person who lost your way. Robert began to cry. Dorothy, I ruined everything. I lost everything. I have nothing. I am nothing. You're my brother, Dorothy held his hand. That will never change. Can you forgive me? I forgave you a long time ago, Robert. I was just waiting for you to come back. In the following days, while Robert recovered in the hospital, Dorothy spent the afternoons with him. Gradually, he told his story of the last 20 years. Life on the streets, addiction, odd jobs, loneliness. Dorothy, he said one day, I saw you on television. I saw the interview about the sweet shops, about the social projects. I was so proud of my sister. Why didn't you look for us before? Because I was ashamed. How could I just show up out of nowhere after everything I did? Robert, pride is a feeling too expensive for someone who has nothing. Robert laughed for the first time since they had reunited. You were always the wisest in the family. I'm not wise. I just learned that holding a grudge is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. When Robert was discharged from the hospital, Dorothy took him home. Brandon had prepared the guest room, and William had arranged for new clothes. Dorothy, Robert said upon entering the apartment, all this is yours? Ours, she corrected. It's ours now. Robert was moved to see how his sister had managed to prosper. But what impressed him most was realizing that despite her success, Dorothy was still the same kind and simple person she had always been. Robert, William introduced himself. Nice to meet you. I'm William, a family friend. The businessman who helped my sister? Actually, William smiled, she's the one who helped me. She taught me what really matters in life. Robert gradually learned the whole story of the family that had formed around Dorothy. He was especially moved by Richard's transformation. So you were the owner of the shop who humiliated Dorothy and Brandon? I was, Richard confirmed without trying to hide it. It was the worst day of my life. But it was also the day that saved me. How so? Because that's when I learned I was being a terrible person, and I decided to change. Robert became thoughtful. Do you think it's possible to change even when you're old? I'm sure of it, Richard smiled. If I could do it, anyone can. Inspired by the conversation, Robert asked to work in the sweet shops. He said he wanted to contribute in some way, even if it was just by cleaning the floors. "Robert," Dorothy said, "you don't need to work to prove anything. You are welcome here no matter what." "I know, Dorothy, but I need to feel useful again." Robert started by helping with cleaning and organizing the shops. Gradually, he learned about the business and discovered he was an excellent salesman. His life experience, however painful it had been, had given him a special ability to talk to all kinds of people. He connected especially well with customers who were going through hard times. He could tell when someone was sad, anxious, or needed a kind word. "Robert," William remarked one day, "you have a natural talent for customer service." "It's because I've been on the other side," Robert explained. "I've been judged by my appearance. I've been treated as inferior. So I know how important it is to be welcomed." 6 months after the reunion with Robert, the day of Brandon's wedding arrived. The ceremony would be held at the church in the neighborhood where he and Dorothy lived when they were poor. They made a point of returning to their roots to celebrate the most important moment of their lives. Dorothy was radiant, wearing a blue dress that William had specially made for her. Robert wore a new suit, the first piece of elegant clothing he had owned in decades. Richard was nervous about the responsibility of being the best man, but the most emotional moment was when William walked Brandon to the altar. The boy who had once asked his grandmother for a used coat was now a respected young businessman, about to start his own family. "Mr. William," Brandon whispered as they walked, "thank you for everything." "Thank you for what, my son?" "For giving me the opportunity to be someone in life." "Brandon," William corrected him, "you were always someone, I just helped you discover it." During the ceremony, Dorothy cried profusely. They were tears of joy, of pride, of gratitude. She thought of her daughter, Brandon's mother, and was sure she would be proud of the man the boy had become. At the reception, which took place in the hall of the main sweet shop, all the people who had been important in that family's journey were present. Employees, friends, beneficiaries of the social projects, all celebrating together. Robert gave an emotional speech. "I want to thank my sister Dorothy for giving me the greatest lesson of my life, that it's never too late to start over. And I want to thank Brandon for showing me that family doesn't abandon family no matter what happens. And I want to thank Mr. William," he continued, "for seeing my sister's worth when she herself didn't believe she had any. And Richard," Robert smiled, "for proving to me that real change is possible, as long as we truly want it." When the party ended and everyone went home, the family gathered one last time at Dorothy's house. It was the last time Brandon would sleep there as a single man. "Grandma," he said, "thank you for raising me, for teaching me everything I know, for making me the man I am today." "Thank you," Dorothy replied, "for giving meaning to my life, for making me discover that I was stronger than I imagined." "Mr. William," Brandon turned to the businessman, "will you still be my father even after I get married?" "Forever," William hugged him. "Being a father isn't a matter of blood, it's a matter of love." "Uncle Robert," Brandon hugged his uncle, "I'm glad you came back home." "Me too, kid, me too." "Richard," Brandon addressed the former boutique owner, "thank you for teaching me about forgiveness and second chances. Thank you for giving me the chance to be a better person." 10 years later, that family's story had become an inspiration for many others. Brandon and Emily had 2 children, Dorothy and William. Yes, they named the children after their grandparents. Dorothy, at 83 years old, was still active and lucid, now a proud great-grandmother. Robert had married an employee of the sweet shop and become one of the most beloved salesmen in the chain. Richard had opened his own customer service school. William, at 70 years old, had finally finished his book. The Coat Lesson: How a Child Taught Me the True Meaning of Success. The book became a bestseller and all the proceeds went to the foundation. One day, while walking with her great-grandchildren in the park, Dorothy saw a scene that made her stop. A street child was trying to sell candy to a well-dressed man who completely ignored him. "Wait here, children," she said to Dorothy and William, the great-grandchildren. "Great-grandma will be right back." She approached the child. "Hi, sweetie, how much for your candy?" 50 cents each, Mum." "I'll take all of them." Dorothy smiled. "How many do you have?" All of them? The boy's eyes widened. I have 20. Then I'll take all 20. And one more thing. What, ma'am? If you'd like, you can come work with me. I have a sweet shop and there's always room for hard-working and honest people. The boy couldn't believe what he was hearing. Are you serious, ma'am? Completely serious. What's your name? Tyler, ma'am. Tyler, I'm Dorothy. And I think you'll enjoy meeting my family. And that's how the cycle began again. Tyler went to live with Dorothy, who now had a house big enough to shelter anyone in need. He studied, worked at the sweet shop, learned life values, and became another son in this family that grew with every person who needed love and opportunity. Years later, Tyler graduated in psychology and opened a support center for street children. He always said his mission was to find other Tylers lost in the world and give them the same chance Dorothy had given him. The last time we saw them all together was at Dorothy's 90th birthday party. She was surrounded by more than 50 people she considered family. Biological children, children of the heart, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, employees who became family, people she had helped who were now helping others. At that party, Brandon, now 45 years old and president of the foundation, gave a speech. Grandma, when I was a child and asked you for that used coat, I just wanted to protect you from the cold. I never imagined that moment would change so many lives. Because it wasn't just our lives that changed, he continued. It was hundreds, thousands of lives that were transformed because of the seed you planted in my heart, the seed of kindness. Today, our foundation has helped more than 10,000 families. We have 30 sweet shops in 5 states. We employ more than 1,000 people. We maintain 3 technical schools and 2 community colleges. But you know what our greatest achievement is, Grandma? Brandon smiled through his tears. It's knowing that in every person we help, we plant the same seed you planted in me, and they will plant it in others, and so on, to infinity. Dorothy, her voice now weaker but her eyes still shining, replied, My child, you all make me proud every day, but know that you owe me nothing. Everything we did was what the heart told us to do. And that's what brought us here, William added, the heart, not reason, not calculation, not self-interest, the heart. That's why, Robert concluded, our family will keep growing, because there's a lot of heart in this world needing love, and a lot of love in this family to be shared. That night, when the party ended and everyone went home, Dorothy stayed on her porch looking at the stars. Brandon approached. Grandma, what are you thinking about? I'm thinking about that day, 40 years ago, when you walked into that store asking for a used coat. And what do you think about that day? I think it was the most important day of our lives. Not because that's when we met Mr. William, but because that's when we discovered we had the strength to face any humiliation. What do you mean? My child, if that day we had hung our heads, if we had left the shop ashamed and given up, none of this would have happened. That's true. It was our dignity, our persistence, our love for each other that caught Mr. William's attention. He didn't save us, Brandon. He simply recognized the value that was already within us. Grandma, you are the wisest person I know. I'm not wise, my child, Dorothy smiled. I'm just a grandma who learned that love is the only thing that truly multiplies when you share it. End of story. Tell us what you thought of this inspiring story. Do you believe small acts of kindness can truly transform lives? If this story touched your heart, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories that show the power of compassion and second chances.